It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I am Brian Cat NFL. Paul is Fanatic PH _pick. The Miami Dolphins face the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. Eagles are 9.5-point favorites, 5-6 on the year, but still very much in competition for the NFC East championship with the Dallas Cowboys, especially after the Cowboys drop a game to the Buffalo Bills on Thanksgiving. Highs are expected in the lower 80s. The Eagles are expected to get a lot of players back into their lineup, especially on offense, which we'll get to in a bit. But, Paul, last week was really a showcase week for the Cleveland Browns against the Dolphins. There was a team that had a lot of talent on touchdowns. The Dolphins are completely wiped out at the beginning of the game. Carson Wentz has struggled a little bit this year, but he struggled when the pass rush has been effective against him. The Dolphins aren't offering that right now. And now when you look at it from a matchup perspective, you may have Alshon Jeffrey against Nick Needham and Nelson Aguilar against a Ken Crawley, and that presents a very big matchup problem.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's the Dolphins secondary as a whole presents a matchup problem right now, and that is going to really wear down on the Dolphins pass rush because they're not able to get in there because they don't have time to get in there. They're not a huge batch of speed rushers. If you don't have an insane burst off the edge, you're not helping that secondary right now with what we're lining up. So again, it's and the other aspect as well is the Eagles run a shorter passing game. You look at the yards per reception for all their guys. The highest yards per reception for anybody with 20 or more catches for their team is Miles Sanders, who's fifth on the team in receiving with a 12.5. Other than that, you've got Zach Ertz, he's got 10.6 yards per reception. Nelson Aguilar, who's averaging 8.9, which is not anything impressive. Alshon Jeffrey, 10.4. And to put that in perspective, Alshon's averaging the same yards per catch as Mike Gesicki is this year. Wow. Allen Hurns, Preston Williams, Devontae Parker are all averaging 12.5 yards or more per reception. And Miami's got a higher yards per reception average, and they throw a lot of pump and dump. So you look at that and compare it to the Eagles. They've got a short, quick hit passing game. You've got to jam them at the line of scrimmage, and that's not really Miami's strong suit right now because they're fielding, backups, a depleted set of backups.
Yeah, and when you look at there is that because what we've seen in recent weeks is Nick Needham, Ryan Lewis really getting beat off the line of scrimmage quickly. So like that's a great point that you mentioned that sometimes these pass rushers don't have time to get back there a lot. And so, but another thing the Dolphins may have going for them a little bit more compared to last week is I think Odell Beckham was able to at least had the ability to stretch the field vertically. And I don't see that as much with what the Eagles have to offer here. Like for what you said, I mean, the receivers are not getting down the field effectively. That could make it a lot more of a closer scoring game and could work to the Dolphins' advantage because of that. But taking a look at the Eagles offense here for the year. So yeah, Carson Wentz, 2,530 passing yards on the year, completing 62.6% of his passes. So definitely not the MVP caliber year that he was looking at a couple of years ago. He does have a good touchdown interception ratio. So 17 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, quarterback rating of right around 90, which again is a little bit down for him. So he's looked very rough the last 2 weeks. I mean, the Eagles offense as a whole doesn't put up a lot of points against the Patriots, 10 points against the Patriots, and then 9 points last week against the Seahawks. So they're definitely struggling on offense. But they didn't have Alshon Jeffrey or Nelson Aguilar last week. And Jeffrey and Aguilar are not world beaters by any means. But they're definitely better than who they lined up, which was Jordan Matthews and Matt Collins. Jordan Matthews was picked up off the street, played almost every snap last week for the Eagles, a wide receiver, and then was cut after the game. So that tells you a lot about what the weapons that they have. At the tight end spot here now, Zach Ertz is very iffy for the game, should play based on the time of this recording. But the other guy that's going to be interesting for them is someone we really liked heading into the 2018 draft, and that's Dallas Goedert, who could see a bigger role. Now, in the first year, Mike Gesicki and Dallas Goedert, it was not even a comparison. Goedert was far more of an NFL-ready player and a far better player in general. But this year, I think you can make the case that Goddard's still the better player, but the stats are very similar. Mike Gesicki, 31 catches for 322 yards and a touchdown on 434 snaps. Dallas Goedert, 31 catches, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns on 467 snaps. So when you look at the tight end spot and the decision the Dolphins made last year, this is a game that Mike Gesicki can really step up and say, hey, I'm the better tight end out of these two.
Look, I think we need to make an important distinction here. This is a game where Mike Gesicki can step.
He averaged 5 or 6 yards a carry, granted late in the game in junk time, but I think you just need to spread go in shotgun a little bit more, have Laird in the backfield, and see if you can spread things out enough to where you take some pressure off the line and you can get some of these 5-10 yard carries here and there.
You can, and I just want to. I'm sorry, I keep going back to this. The Eagles have 8 players, including Alshon Jeffrey, who have more rushing yards per attempt than Kalen Ballage. Alshon Jeffrey, on his 1 carry for the year, is averaging 2 yards and a touchdown. Nelson Aguilar, 2 rushes, 7 yards, 3.5 yards per carry with a long of 16 yards, which is twice as long as Kalen Ballage's longest run. Jay Ajayi, long of 11. We've already covered that. Darren Sproles, averaging 3.9 yards per carry. Boston Scott, whoever the hell Boston Scott is, 23 carries, 94 yards, 4.1 yards per attempt, long of 15, has almost caught Kalen Ballage in total overall yardage for the year on his 23 attempts. That's how bad it is. They have 8 players with a higher yards per carry average than Kalen Ballage.
Well, and I'll tell you, the bigger picture too is if you don't get this offensive line to an NFL caliber unit, I'm not saying they're going to do as poorly as Ballage, but they're going to struggle running the ball for a long time. And if they can go out in free agency and they can get a Jack Conklin and another player, and then they get in the draft and it's deep at left tackle, and you've got 3 new starters, and you can play it at an NFL level, I think it doesn't matter as much who you have at running back. So, and the Eagles have found that out as well. They drafted Miles Sanders here at the end of the second round. Hopefully the Dolphins can get that same type of value. So looking at the rest of the unit here, Jakeem Grant goes on injured reserve. Allen Hurns and Albert Wilson are very iffy for this game, but probably are going to play. But if not, man, oh man, the Dolphins, other than Devontae Parker, are going to have to be just scrounging up bodies to put on the field here. And who would have thought Devontae Parker at this time would not only be quite possibly the biggest bright spot for the Dolphins this year, a player that you want to re-sign now, but also the healthiest guy on the team.
Yeah, I mean, and not just healthy, but I mean, you look at him. He's got almost 50 catches now. He's got almost 700 yards. He's averaging 15.1 yards per reception, and he's got 4 touchdowns. I mean, the guy has done everything and more that we could have expected from him, especially given the fact that since Preston Williams went down, he's been our absolute biggest receiving threat. I mean, you want to tell me Allen Hurns is a huge receiving threat? Yeah, he's got more yards per reception than frickin' Aguilar and Alshon Jeffrey. But Allen Hurns is still a liability out on the field, as he proved last week. So, yeah, I if you told me at the beginning of the year I want to re-sign Devontae Parker and I'm maybe okay if they want to cut Albert Wilson, I would have laughed. I would have absolutely laughed and said, yeah, okay, I'm sure I'm going to feel that way 3/4 of the way through the season.
See,
But
I
really,
think
I'm okay
think
with
Albert
cutting
Wilson
Albert
is the liability, and
Yeah.
Allen Hurns. I certainly like Allen Hurns a little more. That's for sure. And Wilson, I'd be shocked if he's not cut at the end of the year. But Albert Wilson's got what on the year? I don't even have it in front of me here. Actually, I do. 20 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown. Barely averaging over 6 yards a catch. And he can't run routes deep. I mean, he's basically a useless football player right now. So we'll see. I mean, I think heading into next year, you're going to have Devontae Parker. Hopefully, you get Preston Williams back at a reasonable time frame. And you've got Jakeem Grant and Allen Hurns under contract. I'm not saying the Dolphins shouldn't add another receiver somewhere. I think they will somewhere in the middle rounds. But wide receiver is actually a position that you can actually look at and say, we may not have to spend a lot of resources there next year.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look at the draft, and you've got, guys like Shee Smith that are going to be there in the later rounds from Carolina, or KJ Hill from Ohio State, or there are just so many out there that in the mid to late rounds can still come in and be effective pieces, because I'm actually going to say, you're not necessarily looking for a true number one wide receiver with Preston Williams and Devontae Parker on the roster. One player that looked like he was washed out and the other that came in as an undrafted free agent. God, that's nice to say.
Yeah, it is. And, it seems like the Dolphins historically, every time that they've made a wide receiver a priority in the offseason, it's bitten them in the ass. They spend all the money on Mike Wallace. They draft Devontae Parker high. They sign Danny Amendola. But when they sit back and actually let the receivers come to them, you get a Jarvis Landry that falls to you late in the second round. You sign Devon Bess as an undrafted free agent. You sign Preston Williams as an undrafted free agent. And I think that's pretty typical. Having a number one wide receiver is the most overrated thing in football. Get some players who have a good rhythm with their quarterback, who are diversified, that can get open and can catch the football. I think if you do that, everything else tends to fall into place. So we've got a little bit off track here. But looking at this game, I don't see any way the Dolphins are not going to get completely demolished on both sides of the football up front. I don't see this being a pretty game. The Eagles are only favored by 9.5 points. If the Dolphins came out of this losing just 30-20 or 20-10 or anywhere in that 9 or 10 point range, I'd be very, very surprised. I think the Eagles are going to run away with this game here. I'm going to go with Eagles 28, Dolphins 7.
Man, you are such a doom and gloom prediction guy this year.
Well, they've lost all their games, so I've been pretty much right.
Not all. They've won 2 in a row. They have a win streak this year. I'm going to be more optimistic here. I'm going to be more optimistic here. I'm going to throw out that the Dolphins do lose, but they managed to get 2 touchdowns in this game and lose the game 42-14. Actually, 42-17.
So I'll put you on the spot. Who catches
field goal?
Who catches the 2 touchdowns?
I think Ryan Fitzpatrick runs one in, and Devontae Parker catches the other.
All right, there you have it. That will do it for our breakdown of the Miami Dolphins Philadelphia Eagles matchup here on the FinSide. You can follow Paul and I on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I'm Brian Cat NFL. Paul is fanatic_pick on Twitter. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the FinSide. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what Brian Cat and Paul about